All right, guys. So, welcome to episode 3 of the Warrior Unfiltered podcast. This is the first episode where we have a guest on. We have Aydan with us, who is Henry's client. He competed this weekend at the UK UP show. So, essentially, the topic of discussion in this episode is going to be everything encompassing show day prep in terms of like peaking. Obviously, I think in this episode, Henry, if I act as kind of like the mediator of the episode and just like ask the general questions that most of the listeners would want to kind of know or ask, and I'll kind of give the reins to you to discuss what you did, and then Aydan, you can just jump in throughout. I think the first thing that we'll start off with, we'll hand it over to you, Aydan. The psychology of prep. Obviously, this is your first ever show. Last year you done the photo shoot?
Yeah, last year was a shoot.
Yeah, so last year was your photo shoot. This year was your first time ever stepping on stage. So I think the first question to start it off is the psychology aspect of it. You know, how did you find it? How long was the prep?
So psychology wise, I felt pretty prepared. Um, as Henry said it a couple of times on the day. It's like it took a little time to kind of get into it due to digestion issues and coming off from a lot bigger and a lot heavier.
Yeah,
Um, so as the prep went on, my confidence was just growing, just getting better, and I wasn't really wobbling. So I think I just had this goal in mind, and I was just like, I've got to smash it. I've got to smash it. Instead of a photo shoot mentality where you go in there to look good for the day and then have a bit of fun. The mindset of this, it's like going into a show, it's a bit more competitive and a bit more serious and professional. So psychology and mentality wise, I was pretty spot on. Even on the day, I was quite relaxed,
yeah,
quite chill. I wasn't stressing until a couple moments. Um, and yeah, it was quite smooth throughout the prep as well. So I had full faith in Henry helping me, making those transitions as he's done it once before, and I was chuffed with how it looked,
yeah,
and I think I looked even better on the stage.
yeah. I think off of that, I think one of the general questions that most people might be intrigued to knowing as to your decision making as for investing in Henry as your coach, because obviously Henry, I mean, I don't want to chuck you under the bus, but you've never stepped on stage yourself, and I know that you've received a lot of stick for this. So from the client's perspective, what was going through your head when you decided to invest into Henry for your first prep?
So I chose Henry for my first prep because he's made obviously numerous transformations of other individuals, all different genetics, all different backgrounds, all different work ethics, and he's been able to adapt and work with these individuals. For example, William, that he has completely different composition to what he is now, and it's crazy like different, and it's crazy impressive on the knowledge that Henry holds. One, I relate a lot to Henry because of, we're quite similar in certain ways. Our work ethic is very high. We're similar age. We both are in the same industry. And I just have faith in someone who talks the good game and then can walk the game afterwards,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
And there's so many coaches that I've interacted with in person and through social media. I'm just I don't see that in them, that I can pick bits that make sense and don't make sense. And
yeah,
every time Henry speaks to me or any of his other clients or through social media, I'm a bit like, okay, that makes logical sense and it's spot on.
yeah.
So even through the photo shoot prep, I just trusted him as an individual and then trusted him as a coach secondary,
Yeah.
and he hasn't done a step wrong. There's nowhere for me to pick anything bad.
Yeah, I think just to add into there, the two key words that I took from that is to emphasize on the relatability. You know, I think it's important that you're finding a coach that you can relate to.
Yeah,
And then you said have faith. You know, I mean, you get all of these top tier coaches out there nowadays. You know, Callum, Tom, etc. They've got obviously this list of accolades of all these wins that they've won over the years, but that's not taking anything away from them, but sometimes it's more to it than just the accolades. It's having somebody that you can trust, you can have faith in them to guide you through that process, and you know, some of that is relatable. So yeah.
I think as well, a good point is that like they all started with their first athlete at one point as well. Like
100%.
you need that first initial athlete to trust you.
Yeah.
And let's be honest, Tom, Cal, the top guys, because I work with Tom, that they probably knew a lot of the stuff they knew before they had their first athlete. And it's like you need that first individual to actually trust you to take them through that process for you to actually show what you know.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of trouble. Like because I appreciate Aydan trusting me to do it, because it's probably like the first competitive client you had. It's you're asking for a lot of trust to prove. Like you can't tell someone I 100% can prep you, and they're like, yeah, but have you done it to anyone before? And you're like, no.
Yeah.
So it is a lot of trust when you could pick someone who's like got 100 wins, and you're like, well, they know they can do it because you've got 100 pictures of clients who have won. So it's it's getting that first athlete to trust you to do it.
Yeah.
It's all good saying you know it until you've done it.
I think as well, somebody for a first timer, you want somebody who you can connect with and have that support, you know, besides just having that roster of wins. I'm not obviously going to out them say anything in a disrespectful way, but they might not be able to put the same level of time into somebody who's a first timer when they've got these higher caliber athletes on their team. So somebody for like you, an example, Aydan, you're going to want somebody who can actually communicate with you on a daily basis if needed, you know? Would you?
Like, don't get me wrong. Like in the final days of prep, it was kind of like I was in that mentality where I was quite exhausted, and I was just like, I don't want to text anyone, I don't want to talk to anyone, I don't want to do anything. But I understand that I had to tick these boxes and get the job done, because I'm not investing 19 weeks of my life just to fuck up at the end.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think moving on from that, Henry, if we pass it on to you. So just talk through like your methodology when it comes to mapping out the time frame. So from the beginning of prep up until show day.
Yeah. Okay. So this prep. So I've dieted Aydan before for a photo shoot. That was a lot easier, and I think we've took some useful points from both of our sides of what happened this time and what we're not going to do like moving forward. So what happened is after the photo shoot, Aydan you done your own off season, didn't you, for a period of time? And I think one of the key things we learned is Aydan is not the individual or the physique that needs to be pushing heavy in an off season. Coming from his peak off season this year, we were 7 kilos heavier, and getting his body actually moving from a position of like poor insulin sensitivity. His ability to just partition nutrients was.
Didn't you have some underlying gut issues as well at the time?
Yeah, so I developed obviously bad digestion. I thought I was lactose intolerant. I couldn't really digest the food properly, so I wasn't going to the toilet, as well as I was dealing with alopecia. So my body was stressed out internally, and I was trying to deal with that.
Yeah. It's like dealing with those lower hanging fruits to begin with, you know, just rectifying them before you transition into prep.
Yeah.
You need a holding phase. So where Aydan came back to me after peak off season, we didn't have the time frame to have a holding phase. So what happened was he's gone from this position where he really couldn't handle the amount of food that he was on. And as we started coming down in food, his ability to partition nutrients started coming up. So it's like we'll see some drops in weight, but then as his body was more efficient, actually utilizing nutrients was coming back up. So it's like trying to actually find that set point of caloric intake took a few weeks, which we potentially had lost, and then was playing catch up towards the back end. But it's once we got in that groove, and I think that was probably around the 12-week out mark, we really started to actually finally see the response we wanted from his body, and it started to run a bit smoother. But definitely for future diets, I mean, we're going to do your off season together this time. I'm letting Aydan come out of within a 10 to 15 kg, well, more like 10 to 12 kg proximity of like stage condition. We'll keep him hovering over that. When it does come around to dieting, we can do a shorter duration, we're not going to need to push as aggressively in terms of your caloric intake. So we're not going to. I mean, there was points in the prep where, I mean, me and Em saw you in the gym one morning, and Em was like, you look like you've nearly killed Aydan. And it was, and we was having to dig, like, considering Aydan's doing 20,000 steps a day as a PT, had to dig you on 100 grams of carbs a day, like training day, for 4 weeks straight. That's not really optimal in terms of supporting your work and just like generally being a functioning human. So keeping you in a good spot next off season for sure. And I think mapping out the prep, I think we just sort of I went in with the mindset of we'll just do exactly the same as what we did last time and we'll get the same response. And we quickly learned that was never going to be the case. It was a completely different game. So we took every week as it was, and it got to a point at 10 weeks out, I was like, we need to just check in daily to monitor this. So we was doing like pictures, body weight every single morning and post workout a couple of times a week just to make sure, because leaving someone a week in a prep when their body is reacting in funny ways is way too long. You're losing too much.
I just say you're wasting time essentially. You know, there's something that you can probably pick up a lot sooner rather than just doing that one check in a week. I've got the same with one of my athletes at the moment. You know, we're essentially having similar aspects in terms of just not responding. So we have moved to like daily check-ins just to keep an eye on things on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I think the time frame. So what was the actual duration of the prep?
20. We did 20 weeks, and we started just before Christmas. We had Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Boxing Day off, which you didn't really overindulge at all. I think it was about a kilo up, which is nothing. And then just went straight through until now. I mean, we didn't have a single off-plan meal. I did say you could have one on your birthday, but you just made like home-cooked fish and sweet potatoes. So there's like we did the whole way through. It's by far the harshest diet I've ever run for anyone.
Yeah, sometimes
but harsh but sustainable.
Debatable.
For me, it's sustainable.
Yeah. Relatively speaking. Yeah, so I think if we move into actual show day now, so we can look at some of the variables for peaking. I mean, obviously, the majority of the peak is going to be done prior to the actual show day. But if we look into like what you've done from a carbohydrate manipulation standpoint, water, sodium, and then just managing that look throughout. See, for those who are listening and watching, I was there also, just kind of like not really a second eye, but just kind of supporting Henry. And one of the key things that I took away from the show was the fact that Henry managed to peak Aydan, and then the morning look was pretty much sustained across the entire day. Now, I know obviously for yourself, how much did you weigh on show day?
69.2 or 3.
Let's just say 69 kilos. I know obviously like you are a smaller individual, so it's a relatively easier to manage that, but still I think it's quite prevalent for a lot of people to peak their athletes and they've got obviously 100% fullness, 95% condition, but then trying to hold that throughout the day becomes very, very difficult and it's very arduous. A lot of people tend to fade as the day goes on, but I think with you, as I said, that was probably the key thing that I took away, which I thought was really impressive. The fact that you managed to hold him and that condition. If anything, he got better in the overall. So
yeah, I think he was better in the overall for sure.
Yeah. A little bit tighter. Yeah, go on.
I think so. What I'll run sort of through because just doing show day, you sort of missed the carb protocol. So what we had him on 100 carb every day leading until Thursday. So then Thursday we went straight in at 600 grams of carbs. I was going to be a little bit more assertive, but Aydan had the week off work. So when you're taking out the extra steps it was going to do, I thought we'd actually pull back a little bit there. And we did run strong peak max alongside some of our meals as we moved through, just as you put carbs in, you are going to draw some fluid in, and peak max just helps to skim the top off.
Yeah.
So after Thursday, we had those 600 grams in. Friday, what I'm going to do with athletes in future is make sure I'm there with them all day. So essentially, we traveled to Birmingham and got an Airbnb. So at that point, I did have a pre-made carb sort of loading day for him. So you had the first 2 meals looked at you in the Airbnb, and at that point I sort of decided, now I'm here and looking in person, what we're just going to do is take each meal as it goes. So I would essentially look at him. 45 minutes, we'll do some rounds of posing to move things around. By the second round of posing, we was getting a bit more of a clearer image once nutrients started getting shuttled about a bit of where fullness was and where we needed to push. We'll then check body weight and basically assess on body weight how well we're actually moving nutrients around as well. Based off of that data, then we would just make whatever we're having for the next meal and decide as we go through. And there was a slight hiccup throughout the second day of loading, which I haven't actually mentioned to you, Aydan, until now, is when I noticed that you went about 4 hours without having a single sip of water. And then when you come out of your tan, I watched you. It somehow managed to eat 6 rice cakes without touching any liquid, which was quite impressive.
Yeah.
And then when you posed, like your fullness was going away, I was like, right. So then we needed. So I think next time we peak you for something, just like in 5 weeks' time, making sure fluids managed, because to actually fill someone out alongside carbs, you need sodium and fluid. As soon as one of those is there, one of those is gone, you're not going to get that in. So I think we did 5 meals on that second day and kept checking. And then Aydan was up quite late, so I added one more look over him and gave him a last little top up of carbs, like 40 before bed. Then the morning of the show, I made him get up super early. Just because the earlier you get someone up on show day, the longer you have to fix anything that might have potentially gone wrong. You're just giving yourself some hours back to basically, if you see something you don't like, you've got more time to fix it rather than,
I mean,
you woke up at 6. If you got up at 9, that's 3 hours lost that we could have made adjustments. So I had a look over him at 6, set a meal, done the same at 8:30. Quite happy with the look there. I think with Aydan, the one thing you have to take into account, which I sort of spoke to you, Harry, as well, because I was sending you pictures, is you do not see any sign of fullness in Aydan until he's pumped. And like he looks flat as a pancake on the morning of the show.
Yeah, every picture that you sent over to me, I was just like, he still looks flat. He still looks flat. And then you just kept saying, I haven't pumped him up yet. And then later on in the day, prior to you stepping on, you sent a picture backstage with a tiny pump. It was just like bang, a drastic difference.
Yeah. So assessing fullness with Aydan isn't realistic. There is obviously some aspect to looking at the physique, but it's more putting carbs in, checking his weight, making sure we don't spill, but we're like putting enough in to fill him out, because you're never going to see with his physique how full he is until he's pumped. And I can't pump him up the day before because we can't use those nutrients. So and then on that morning we basically continued drying him out. So we didn't really put carbs back in until about 10. So he had his base coat, his second coat of tan. At 10, we started putting sodium, carbs, and fluid back in. We managed before he was on stage at 3 to put 2 meals in, a slightly smaller meal, and then before about half an hour before stage, we put some pre-workout in. So obviously caffeine being beneficial there, some sodium, a pump workout formula, and about 150 ml of Lucozade, and just a spoonful of jam. Pumped him up. I think the issue we did with the pump up is I started pumping you up too early, and then you was pumped, and then I realized, and then they basically said there was no one in classic, and then there was people in classic, so that added a whole class.
One kid. I should have done it.
So that added a whole nother class. So then I had to keep him pumped, which he held it well, but that's why he was quite sweaty in the first class.
Yeah.
As soon as he come off stage, I mean, you look phenomenal in that class. I just wanted to then assess how you would look, because at that point we didn't know you had won your class. So all I knew was coming back on stage later in the day to get an award of some sort, whether it was whatever placing you had got. So I thought, let's try something and be a little bit more assertive on your sodium. So I think we instantly went backstage. We had about 45 minutes to an hour. I gave you 2 rice cakes with like a gram of sodium on each one. And then I just said, drink pretty much the rest of that bottle of Lucozade. Come downstairs, and then that second time you went on stage when we started pumping you up, because no one else was pumping up for their awards. And I was like, you want to look good for them pictures. So
no, I noticed that because one of the athletes, Mario, he was just there messing around, and he scoffed like a full pizza before we went on stage. He literally scoffed a full pizza.
Yeah, and then and then I think that time you looked a fair chunk fuller and a bit drier where you I just think that extra bit of sodium done you the world of good, but I didn't obviously want to do that for your class because I've never pushed you that hard with sodium. I didn't want it to, if it had gone wrong when you're actually being judged, for it to go wrong. Let's just try something.
Like you said, you've been a little bit conservative going into the actual class, but then going back for the awards, you might as well just play around with it.
Yeah.
It's just,
and then
from your perspective, it's just more data that you're collecting.
Yeah. And obviously then you took your class win and then pretty much held fullness all the way from your class win to the overall. And I think that was probably the thing I was most impressed with is not only like the peak, but your ability that you can just hold fullness class after class. So I think in future we'll definitely be able to put you in. The reason I just kept him in one class is because I didn't want him to flatten off and look worse throughout the day, when I think he just progressively gets better. So next show we're going to try him out in a few other classes throughout the day because his body can do it.
Yeah, it's the same thing as like what Harry you said and Henry you said. They asked you to go get some pictures. Just don't do it because you're afraid of flattening out and not looking good for the actual.
Yeah, because there was one kid. So just to kind of like elaborate onto that, they were getting, obviously the promoters, they were getting a couple of the athletes to step on stage while they're working out the lighting, and there was one kid, I think it was Connor, I think that was his name, or it might have been Reese, but whoever, they got him on stage, and I mean, he looked okay to begin with, but then as the day went on, he just flattened right out, and he looked so soft. And I mean, I know it might be the nuance, but doing something like that, before the show even kicks off, it can make or break your condition when you step on stage for your class. But I think with what you said, Henry, obviously talking about what you're going to do in the future, I think that's a good segue to move on to what the plans are moving on. So, Aydan, like, what's the plan from here? Obviously, I don't think you mentioned, but just in case, obviously, Aydan, you won your show in the end.
Yeah.
So a big congratulations to both of you. Henry, your first win as coach. Aydan, your first win as your first competitive season.
I'm actually going to retire after this, and I'll be the only coach with a 100% win record in the UK.
I mean, I need to make a certificate for you. You're now officially an online coach.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's the plan of action now for you, Aydan?
So me and Henry are planning to go and do the UKUP Sevenoaks.
How long's that?
Just over 4 weeks. Yeah, just over 4 weeks. So I've had 2 to 3 days just myself eating some food, obviously not going mental, and then obviously like I said, yeah.
So we've got a show for the watchers. Look at that. I mean, the jam's gone.
Yeah, the jam's gone. I've already had 2.
Yeah, so go on.
So yeah, we're planning to go to do the UKUP Sevenoaks. I do want to do multiple classes in that show, so I am thinking of running it with Henry's obviously thought process of men's physique, men's open, classic, and if I get top 3 in any of those classes or win, puts me straight into the overall, because even in the overall at Birmingham, I thought I looked quite competitive. I didn't look out of place. So if it was top, if they named 1, 2, and 3 for overall, I thought I would have been third due to condition and fullness.
I would very much agree there. I think in the overall as like a pack, like full pack, because obviously the overall, where it's different classes, you can't really just judge it on size. I think as an overall package in terms of peak, shape, structure, I think the only thing that would have potentially held you back is size. You was one of the smaller athletes on stage, but we knew that was going to be the case going into the show, so we just played on what we had.
Yeah, but that's just obviously a matter of time. Just more time, exposure in the gym, building obviously that muscle tissue. But yeah,
I think I said to you, Harry, when the overall had happened, I said if Aydan was in that peaked, that condition with 15 pounds or more tissue, like mainly on your back, a little bit more on arms and delts, could have quite come to. I reckon you could have been very close to taking that over.
Yeah, I concur. I mean, obviously, again, it's relative to the actual criteria of that class as well. So it's not just based on who's the most conditioned or who's the biggest. You know, you have to have those attributes as well as being as close as you can to the criteria. And I mean, you wasn't far off at all. Condition was on point. Your structure is really good for men's physique. It was just that lack of tissue. So what did you say, like 10, 15 pounds? You add that onto your frame, 100% you could be contentious for that overall.
Yeah, give me
think
2 years.
Yeah, I think a good note is even in his class, you was the smallest guy in terms of muscularity and height, but you looked comparable. You looked like you had just as much muscle tissue as everyone else simply because of the condition you was in.
And
Yeah.
the level of fullness that you bought as well. That's what I
Yeah.
said to you, you know, just the level of fullness that you bought and managed to sustain throughout, it just showed, it kind of created that illusion that you had more tissue on your frame,
Yeah.
which actually plays to your advantage as well. My only question, I'm going to be selfish here. Why only UK UP? No
This
other
is
federation?
something I was going to speak to him about as well.
You can do that in private?
No, we are going to be discussing tomorrow plans moving forward. I wanted to basically a bit chill time, but I do think there would be some merit in trying a harder federation. I think because his first show, I think it was very much let's go there, see where we stack up, and I think due to that performance, if we can bring a similar package, if not a little bit tighter as well, which we have the ability to do, I think in just try out a PCA or something like that. And even if you place not as highly there because it is a harder federation, you can at least get the feedback of go right. This is now the gap between me and this next level up because you're always going to want to improve and move up throughout the ranks. And it just gives you that opportunity to stand next to those higher caliber athletes and go, right, this is where they've slightly edged me. This is what I need to do over off season to then close that gap and then become a better athlete year after year.
Yeah, well, I fully agree with doing that because even going into the UKUP, I did want more of a challenge and more of a, higher bar to meet. If that makes sense.
Yeah. To get that challenge in a federation like PCA.
Yeah, I do want to be challenged, and I do want to know where my limitations lie so I can surpass them. I don't always want to go into a show and go, you know what, I can win it. I want to go into a show and be like, this will be hard, and I want to graft.
For sure. Yeah.
So
yeah, I think it's a very good opportunity, both psychologically for an athlete to go into a show and not win. I know it sounds crazy, but it gives you an opportunity to feel how it feels to not do well and learn that sportsmanship of how to take a loss well, and also to actually see yourself against good guys. Because if you win every show you go into, you are just bodybuilding because you like collecting trophies and are not pushing yourself to be an athlete you want to be.
Yeah, I could name a few people, but we won't do that. I think obviously most people you're going to learn, like if you speak to anybody that's successful, they will tell you that they've learned most of what they've learned from their failures and their losses as opposed to their success. So if you're always going into these shows, which you know is an easy walk in the park, you're never going to learn anything. There's nothing really to take away from that.
I mean, I'm personally doing a two bros middleweights this year. I'm going to get smoked out my socks.
Yeah.
But that's absolutely fine because I can stand next to those middleweights, which is where I want to be competitive in the future, and go, right, how have they beaten me? Yeah. And how can I fix it over the next 2 years so I can come back and edge them?
Yeah. I mean, my first show that I done in 2017, I went straight in to just open bodybuilding. I said to myself, I'm not going to do it first time. I just want to kind of go straight into the deep end and see where I stand. That was just my personal opinion, because I feel like if I'm going to be completely smoked, then this might not be the path for me. But if I feel like I'm standing amongst some other good athletes and I'm kind of like contentious with them, then this could be the path for me. I mean, it's person dependent. But I think what we'll do is we'll wrap it up there. Is there anything else you want to add on, Henry?
No, I'm happy with calling it there. And obviously we will have more episodes coming out. And lastly, we do have a YouTube video wrapping up the full show day weekend coming in the next few weeks. So that'll be cool for people to watch.
Whose channel will that be on?
That'll be on mine, and Aydan may be uploading it on his. So
I'll just add it into the description on both of these.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll wrap up there. Aydan, again, a massive congratulations to you. I mean, you didn't bring your
Cheers.
medal with you. Henry, again.
I did have a thought of wearing it, but
Yeah,
I'll
you
keep it
should have
right
bought it. Should have bought it and wore it. Wow. But yeah, thank you everybody for tuning in again for episode 3, and we'll see you all guys on the next episode. Cheers.
in a bit.